Hi, everyone. My name is Lillian Mitchell. I'm a senior sales program manager here at QuickBase. Thought I'd introduce myself first and then introduce the panelists as well. I'd say my history with sales is a bit of a sales Swiss Army knife, if you will. I was a first salesperson at a company called Roomzilla, first employee. And then at a more recent role, I was sales adjacent, so sales enablement, sales engineering, sales onboarding, sales operations, all things sales. And now I'm a senior sales program manager at QuickBase. So kind of done all things sales and sales adjacent. So I'm very excited to be here. And now let's introduce the panelists. Bridget, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Unlike Lillian, I'm not exactly a Swiss Army knife. Like, I'm one blade in the Swiss Army knife. I've been focused entirely on sales for my career, and specifically technical sales at really early stage companies. And so in sales parlance, I really like the building. So really happy to be here. Also, my COVID location is California. So if it looks a little dark in the background, you'll know why. So good morning, everyone.
Bridget, thank you so much for being here so incredibly early in your time.
People who know me, Lillian, I'm totally an early bird. So this is a good time for me.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. All right, Brian, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. So my name is Brian Fisher. I'm the director of sales engineering for the East and Public Sector at AppDynamics. I've been in sort of the technical sales and SE role for, well, it's coming up on 25 years. It's kind of scary to think about that long. I actually started out as a salesperson, an inside salesperson for Symantec for my first couple of years of my career. Although I'd spent the bulk of my career at various startups, mostly in the application performance management space, including AppDynamics, which is really not quite a startup anymore since we are a billion-dollar organization and part of Cisco. But had the pleasure of being part of many of the fastest growing startups over the past 20 years and excited to chat with the people here. So.
And
go ahead, Lori.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lori Richardson, and I am the founder of a sales strategy firm called ScoreMore Sales. I was in sales for 15 years and had a quota for every quarter of those 15 years. So happy new quarter to those of you that are in sales and are just starting in April. And for founders as well, sales is a big part of your job. In addition to starting ScoreMore Sales, I have also gotten involved in helping get more women into sales through a community called Women Sales Pros. And for the local Boston area folks, I'm co-president of the AAISP Boston chapter, which is for inside sales professionals, which is basically what most of us are now. So it's great to be here.
All right. Thank you, all the panelists. Really appreciate those introductions. Now we're going to get into questions. Before we do this, we wanted to do a little bit of a warm-up for a couple of poll questions. So, all right, our first poll question is, how much experience in sales do you have? 1 to 3 years, 4 to 7 years, 8 years plus, or still super new? And I believe Stephanie is going to set that poll up for us. We'll give it. This is going to help us as we orient our answers to the questions. Panelists, you want to take a guess as to our percentages?
I can actually see the answers.
Yeah.
I don't want to lie.
All right. So looks like we have a lot of folks who are earlier in their sales career. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So yeah, about more than 60% have less or 3 years or less. So, all right, we're probably going to orient our answers that way. Okay, and then next question is, what role in sales are you? Inside sales, field sales, BDR, and you can read the rest of the questions, rest of the options. Okay, a lot of BDRs, a lot of AEs. Awesome. Ooh, lots of others. Okay. Great. All right. So panelists, hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight before we dive in. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about value first selling. But first, we're going to let's actually address the answer to the question as the title of the panel, right? What do you do after that calendar invite? So panelists, could you talk a little bit about your approach to preparing for the call once the prospect has accepted your invite?
Sure, I can take that. So one of the most important things is, after you get the calendar invite, is that you certainly need to make sure that you're prepped and ready for the customer call itself. And in terms of doing that, if you've had an ability to do any discovery, making sure that you're reviewing your notes, understanding what their specific pain points are that you're going to be targeting. In our world in sales engineering, it's incredibly critical to make sure that you're there doing a bit of customization of any of the demos or any of the technical parts of the presentation that you're doing. So for us, taking a look at in the application management world, taking a look at the applications they have, potentially publicly facing applications, customizing the demo to make it look as if you were monitoring their specific applications, because it makes it more familiar for the customer. You want them to feel as if we already know them, feel as if we know what their pains are, we know what their struggles are, we know what their applications are, and that we're showing our solution in the context of their world, so it can be as impactful as possible. Those are just a couple of things that we look to do. But beyond that, also taking a look at the customer in general and understanding any background around the organization, any issues that they've been having or occurring. Of course, it's all dependent upon the solution. I'm specifically focusing and talking about our world in application performance management, but other solutions will have other things that you're going to be focusing on. But doing your homework and identifying as much as possible how you can make it pertinent to them is of course key.
I would add that I wouldn't necessarily do a demo. I know you mentioned a demo, Brian, but yep. I want to ask questions. I want to learn about the person on the call or the people on the call, and of course do the homework like you mentioned. I'd like to see LinkedIn and see what they posted recently so that I can learn something about the person's interests, for example. And you can scroll down and see what people have shared and posted at length, so that can be helpful, but keep it short, right? And then I want to learn what their goals are, what their issues are that caused this to come about.
And I would say I will +1 Lori and Brian's comments on the research. I think there are a lot of BDRs on the call. One of the things and early AEs is making sure that we don't, you could spend an hour on research on these companies. And so you have to learn how to do it very efficiently to get that information. So I would say that is one point. The other thing I think that's important is, what are the areas of connection and similarity that I might have with that individual or our company might have, just areas that we can connect and where there's commonality. It just tends to be more of a door opener. So some of them may be more personal, or, oh, I see that you're connected to one of our founders, or I see that you used to work at a company that my boss worked at. Things like that just are great icebreakers to help the conversation flow.
Okay, great. Thank you all three for answering that question. I love all the different perspectives that you have. All right. Next, we're going to talk about value first. But before we talk about value first, can we actually define what do you mean by that?
I'll start. I think when you look at what a values-based selling approach is, it's, I mean, it's just like what it sounds, is how can we provide some value to the prospect or customer at every point in time when we interact with them. And I don't think there are many people that would disagree that that's important. I think what tends to happen, though, is we think we're adding value by just telling them the features that we've got. And oftentimes, the reason a salesperson will do that is we'll get into a conversation with a prospect and they'll ask us about features. And they'll have read something on a website, or they're looking at a comparison, or they'll see a matrix. And so it takes some skill to be able to navigate the conversation away from just a feature comparison to why a particular feature perhaps may be important depending on what they're trying to achieve. So I think I would just say it's how do we align to what they're interested in, what they care about, and work to satisfy that at every interaction we have with them.
Love that. Oh, go ahead, Brian.
So when we're taking a look at it, it gets pretty simple. When you think about value, it's really almost inevitably addressing a pain. For most customers, especially in the IT cycle, buying cycles in this day and age, you're either saving someone money, you are helping them earn more money, or you're helping reduce risks. So if you can identify usually the pain that's addressed to their needs, and the needs are usually around one of those three things, you pretty much have a great connection with the customer and what they're going to respond and really be looking for. So understanding that pain and understanding it usually in the context of those three things can help you open up them when you're having those discussions and going further and creating those connections. And inevitably, those are the values that really, when people buy software today, that's really effectively what they're looking for. Hey, how can I save money or save time, right? Which is usually money. How can I, make more money for my company or increase my, earnings potential with my customers? Or how can I reduce risk, especially a risk to brand? Brand is so important in this day and age. And if you can find out how you can help them protect their brand or stop things from like security incidents or something like that from happening, man, those are the doors that can open almost any IT person's heart. So.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian.
And I would just add that it's from the buyer's point of view. It's not what you think value is. It's what they think value is.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And following on to that, can you provide some examples of when a value-first approach was more successful than focusing on those individual features? Anything in your sales history?
Well, I mean, what I thought of value first for me sometimes is helping a customer with a different problem that I don't solve for. But it might be that they can't find, they've had some turnover. And, they're just looking to bring new candidates in to help them before they can even think about solving the problems that they have. So it might be something totally unrelated to something that I don't do, but I have a strategic referrer. I have somebody in the community that I can recommend to them to help them solve that issue. And that's a very simple form of value add that people don't always think about.
Sure. Let me give you a concrete example that I have in my past that I often bring up to my own teams as I sit down and chat with them about selling in this way. About 4 years ago, we were engaging with Morgan Stanley for the first time. And we were in a typical bake-off with a whole host of other solutions. The other solutions were coming in doing the typical feature pitch. Hey, look, we have this widget. We have this amazing thing. The first thing we did is take a look and understand why Why are they looking to bring us in? And it became abundantly clear without even doing hardly 5 minutes of research. This was for their wealth management line of business. And they had constant downtime of their applications. They were losing their best and brightest financial advisors because their application was not worth using. It was tremendously painful for them. And when you have, or a financial service company, your financial advisors fleeing, you're in the newspaper with your downtime, your applications, you can't get better pain. So instead of focusing on features or functions, we immediately went to the line of business and said, hey, if we could solve that for you, if we could reduce the outages down to maybe 80% of those outages, make them disappear tomorrow. And then also make sure that the performance of your application meets the needs of your financial advisor so they want to stay. What would that mean to you? The conversation went from there. And there was never a discussion after that whether or not or who was going to be the winner in that. They immediately said AppDynamics is going to be the winner, and we're going to engage with them, and we're going to go through a full sales cycle with them to figure out whether or not they can truly deliver on this. And we did. So that's how, for us, value selling was super valuable in that case, and it led to millions of dollars worth of sales for us in the future. So.
That's an awesome story. Thank you for sharing it, Brian. Mm-hmm. Bridget, did you want to add to that? Or you?
No, I thought that was a great example. No, just awesome.
Yeah, that's a good one to remember for sure.
Yeah.
All right, next question, talking about discovery calls, and it's a two-part question, so I'll ask the first one first. How do you drive the discovery or first call of an opportunity so that you find out the customer pain? And why don't we start with Lori?
Yeah, I have a list of questions, but I don't read them. And I don't encourage anyone to do that. Like, scripting is, it's a controversial topic, but it is really good to have an outline or bullet points, kind of a pathway for where you're trying to go. Because when you're very new, as I was new in many different roles, I would forget an important question. And the good news is that if you ever do that, it's okay, because you can reconnect with someone and you can say, hey, there was one thing I meant to ask you that I didn't. And so you don't need to get too worked up about doing it perfectly. Just give your best effort. And, I want to ask questions that will help me understand this scenario for the buyer. And what I want to suggest too is that people don't always have a problem to solve. Some people have massive problems. Don't get me wrong. A lot of people have problems. But there's another thing to think about, and it's aspirational. It's, things are okay, but we really like to get to this point. And that's aspirational. So if you focus on pain, you're not always going to get to that. So keep that in mind. It's a little tip that I would put out there, and go from there.
That's interesting. I don't think I've ever gotten that advice before. Maybe if I had, I would have done a little bit better.
Yeah, I think too, I agree with that, Lori. Like it's not always pain. Sometimes it is aspirational. I encourage my team to understand why, and ask, why is the person on the call? Like, why did they agree to take this? Because that will sometimes illuminate. I think also for newer BDRs and AEs, and I agree, it's good to have a list of questions and understand what you're trying to get to and have a goal for the call. So if you're new and feel a little rigid around these questions, a way to frame it is to say, you know what, I'm trying to figure out if this is going to be a good fit. Like, I don't want to waste your time. So with your permission, I'm going to ask some questions to determine if it makes sense for us to continue. And sometimes that just opens up the conversation to let them know, I'm going to ask a few questions here where it doesn't feel so much like an interrogation. Mm-hmm. And I think that the key is to just be curious. and really try to understand what they're trying to achieve. And another question I'll encourage the team to ask, particularly if it's more aspirational, if you could wave a magic wand, what would your solution, or what would this look like for you? Where are the gaps that perhaps you're trying to fill? And it's not a promise that I can fill them, but what are you trying to do that perhaps we might be able to help with?
Bridget, I love the magic wand question. I've certainly used it. I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads here. I also like taking it, a little step further as well. We have a magic wand, and now you're in this magical universe. What do you see around you? What's different in your world? And that's been interesting as well. And Bridget, you've predicted the next question, which is, what are some of the questions that you ask or listen for? So you get an A+ on that one.
Do you want me to answer it?
If you have more.
No, I mean, some of it I've already said. Maybe Laura and Brian have some that they would specifically ask as well.
I just added, why now? Not just why, but why now? What, and that can be very telling, because they might say, oh, I don't know, someone referred me and I just accepted the call. So there may not be as much of a need as someone that tells you a little more about, we need to solve this. We have a real issue. And if it doesn't get solved, we're losing a lot of money, or we're not going to grow revenue.
Yeah. When you're trying to get in with a customer and start understanding more about them, especially how you kind of take them from where you are at the beginning to where you want to get, which is the finish line. The best 3 questions you can always try and answer, and it's usually not in these specific terms. You have to change the question depending upon the situation to pull this out. But why anything? Why are they even looking at or even considering anything that you sell? Like, there must be something, right? Why now? Because that tells you, as Lori states, why would they even be considering spending any money now when they have a whole set of other priorities? And then the last thing you're really trying to understand is why your solution, right? Mm-hmm. And those are the interesting things of like aligning your solution to their needs and understanding their needs. If you can answer those 3 questions for yourselves, right, by asking a lot of other open-ended questions, and that's the key. Those are the things that are going to lead you to understanding how you get them to the point of where they realize your solution's what they need and moving forward. As far as specific questions, I see that, again, we've got a lot of BDRs and account executives who in many ways are frankly doing a lot of cold calling. It's realistic. In fact, I think there was a session just before this on cold calling, how uncomfortable it can be. And early on in my career, that was me. I was an inside sales rep, not a sales engineer. I had to pick up a call phone every day and just randomly talk to someone. And one of the most interesting things that I found very early on was I wasn't hey, let me sell you something. I found the best thing to do was to call them up and say, hey, I'm Brian Fisher from Symantec. I have these amazing tools. I heard you were interested. I just wanted to get some feedback from you on what you're looking for from solutions like this, and understand what needs you have. It's just a great open-ended question. Just tell me more about the things that you just want feedback. I'm not trying to sell you. I'm just trying to want. All of a sudden, the floodgates opened up, especially with IT professionals that want to tell you what they're struggling with. And it was an hour-long conversation with almost every single person that led to me having that next step, because you can then ask the follow-up questions. Well, who is this important to, right? What would be meaningful if you could solve that specific issue, right? Those additional open questions just take the conversation and allow you to keep on going with it. So those are just some things that I've used in my past that might be helpful for, especially, again, the BDRs and the AEs that are struggling with those first couple questions you interact with customers. So.
Can I add to that real quick, Lillian?
You may.
What you said, Brian, it reminded me of a sales manager I had years ago who he would say, you need to knock people off their homeostasis. In other words, say something that would make people go, oh, it's different. It's not the expected. Well, can I give you a demo? Not everybody wants a demo right now. But if you could present it in that way, like Brian said, if it were you, what would you really ideally want? We may not have all those features, but I'd love to hear it from you. People don't expect that. And I love that strategy.
Great. Thank you. Thank you both. All right. The reason I paused was I'm debating between a couple of questions that I really like. But let's talk about customer pain, and then we'll talk about feature bake-off that kind of alludes to what Brian was talking about earlier. But how do you align your sales pitch to a customer's pain? When and how do you pivot? And Brian, I believe your Morgan Stanley example kind of lines up with this, but any other ones?
Do you have one, Bridget?
Well, Lori, I was just going to say that I think it's, as you mentioned, it's not just necessarily aligning around their pain. It could be around their aspiration.
Yeah.
But every part of the pitch needs to be about the customer. They're the star of the show. Mm-hmm. It's not our product or solution. It's all around them and what they're trying to achieve. And so I think everything needs to be looked at in that lens. And part of it is you just have to know enough about them and what they're trying to accomplish to create a presentation that isn't just a generic features-based presentation.
Yeah, and if you're lucky enough to be a BDR or SDR, or your first time, it's your first role in making calls, and you're able to work in a specific sector or work with a specific title. Like I spent a period of time calling on chief financial officers and the people around them. So there was a very, very chiseled answer in terms of what their problems are, even though they're different industries. And I think it's harder when you call all sorts of industries, maybe the same title, maybe different titles. So knowing who your buyer is first, and what those challenges are that generally that they have, and you can find those through Googling, about roles. You can look online and find all sorts of generalized answers to say, Bridget, that this might not be your issue, but we found that some of your industry peers have been, have had trouble with this. Don't know if that is the same for you, so that you're not telling someone, Brian, I know what your problem is, because people don't like that, and you don't know until they tell you.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting when you take a look, because in my experience, this is one of the things that separates, good salespeople or sales engineers from great, right? How do you, in some cases, in the middle of a presentation, calibrate and immediately be able to transition and position your solution or stories that relate to the customer's pain? And it can be very hard because you have to do it like on the fly in some cases. Some of the things, the tricks that might be helpful for the listeners here is that learn all of the success stories that your organization has. Because one of the most important things when you're sitting down with a customer is to tell them, we have done this with a customer is to tell them, we have done this in other places before, and here's how we've accomplished that. And here's the value they saw, right? So sitting here listening, first off, you just have to listen to their pain, understand what they're trying to address or their aspirations, as Bridget rightfully says. What are they trying to accomplish? And say, yeah, it's interesting. We had that same issue at JP Morgan Chase, and here are the ways that we help them address this by reducing the outages or increasing the XYZ or whatever it is. And this is a way that we potentially could provide that same value to you. If you have a proof point, those are the types of things that will often engage people, because even if it's a competitor, they don't want the competitor to be in front of them. They don't want the competitor to have a competitive advantage. They want to engage with you as much as the competitors do, so that they have those advantages and can beat those competitors. So success stories can be one of the ways. The other ways is just, again, making sure that you're calibrating your messages, you're chatting with them moving forward, pointing out the areas of value within your solution for them that relate to their pain, and say, here are the ways that we can help you, even if it's not perfect, help you address some of those pain points that you're trying to have moving forward. And here's the actual potentially dollar value outline might relate to that, if they were good enough to share that. In many cases they may not, but that's okay. That's where you need to dig a little bit deeper later.
Awesome.
I just building off that and Brian's comments about customer success stories and how important it is that the team knows them. We would do that at every quarterly meeting, is have the team practice this, telling the sales stories as if they were the sales rep that sold them. And part of the reason that's so important is third-party validation is a lot stronger than if I say my product does this and we're the best. But if you can say, let me tell you why, let me tell you what other of our customers have said. Let me tell you why other of our customers have decided to make this switch. Let me tell you why some other of our customers have left this particular product. And when it's third-party validation, it's so much stronger. So to really internalize those, it's so important, and be able to share them as if they're your own, as if you were the AE that was the one selling them, is a really strong sales skill.
Absolutely. And we have some of that at QuickBase, where our reps are really able to leverage the material from marketing and product marketing, saying, hey, we did this for this major, retailer, and again, kind of to everyone's points here, talking about here's the pain that they were having and here's how we help them solve it. Not just, here's who we've worked with. And I also wanted to build off of Lori's point about speaking to, IT or operations or, specific roles or titles. Our BDRs will often do blocks of time where they're just calling IT leaders or they're just calling operations leaders. And that helps them, keep them from switching all the time and kind of save a little bit of that energy and learn as well.
That's good. That's a good policy.
Let's keep going along the customer pain or aspirations front. So how do you handle customers that don't really want to share their pain or their internal KPIs around what might be broken? So that's a level of vulnerability there.
Well, I would just say that, sales is a two-way street. So it's not a monologue. And if people won't offer you much, all you can go on is generally what you know about that industry or that role or that company, and go from there. I have the luxury, because I have my own company, that I can choose who I want to do business with. And to a certain extent, sales professionals do too, because, if someone refuses to tell you, I think Brian was talking about that earlier, about if they're not going to tell you much, then sometimes you have to prove yourself so that they're more willing to tell you more. I know I'm that way. Sometimes a lot of people call on me, and I need to hear a little more before I'm just going to drop everything and, share more about what I'm looking to do. So sometimes it's proving yourself a little bit, or showing that you have solutions for others in that industry, in that space, for that title, for that role, and earning the right to move forward. Other times, some people just are real pleased and proud, and they just don't want to show any weakness, that they have any problem, and they want you to figure it out. And you may not be able to work with that person or that company. And I would just move on.
It's almost an indicator, it sounds like.
It can be. Sometimes it's that they just frankly don't know.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can help and just say, Well, rough order of magnitude. Do you think it's, 10 people on an outage call or 50 people on an outage call? And sometimes they'll give you that, or they'll give you an idea, right? And sometimes, as much as you think it's really critical to get that information, you can stop and say, okay, not super comfortable giving these specific numbers. Ask a different question like, well, if we could solve that, what would it mean to you or to your organization? And they'll be like, well, what do you mean? Well, tell me, what would your life look like if that was magically solved? And then in the operations world, people will say, wow, I could get home to my wife or my husband and have weekends again. That would be awesome. Now that sounds like oh, okay. But whoa, you now have an actual personal pain or goal that person probably has. My goal is to get a solution where I can just get home to my family. Man, is that a motivator? And that's important. It's important for you to write that down and think about that. And it might be 15 other different motivations that can be personal goals, professional goals, or organizational goals. Every single one of those is important. Write those down. They're all about the pain and effectively the outcomes you're looking for. And if you can help that, frankly, probably potential champion, we would hope, achieve those goals or show them how you're going to achieve those goals, they'll do almost anything for you because that's their life. That's their professional win. It's their, those are the things that they're striving for. Makes sense?
Yeah, that's great. That's super compelling. I just want to go home to my family.
Yeah.
I wanted to go ahead.
One other thing to add to that. We shouldn't be surprised that people don't want to share their pain with us.
Yeah.
Like we get on the call and are asking, so hey, what's wrong in your family right now? Like what's not working? So we shouldn't be surprised that we get on a call and we expect people are just gonna, that's just human dynamics. It doesn't work that way. So I think we should anticipate that there may be some reticence about sharing it. I've seen this is also depending on, sometimes, as Lori said, we're not going to be able to work with them. Sometimes they don't know. Sometimes it may be something that they just don't want to share right away. This is where I've heard, like where the magic wand question comes in. I think that's been helpful. So in a perfect world, what might it look like for you? If you could have it any way you wanted, and then things start to open up and then more trust potentially develops. But I think we shouldn't be surprised that there will be a reluctance to share just right away what might not be working.
Yeah, and the work that I do, them not knowing is a good thing, because when I get 4 or more answers that are I don't know, then because I have part of my solution has a data tool that can find this out, and probably many of you listening have data tools of some type. I just ask them, do you want to find out? Do you want to know the answers? And that's how we move forward. Because if you don't know basic answers to important questions about how your whatever department in your company works or team or what have you, and it's costing you to not know this. If someone can provide you those answers, would that be important? Well, yeah. And that's how we move forward. So I work for four I don't knows. And then that gets me to move forward.
Nice. That's awesome. I wanted to add, at my last company, ProfitWell, we would ask for an MSA. We'd say, hey, we have IP too. We have things that we're going to share with you about how we do things, and we want to get some confidentiality on our end as well. And by doing that, that automatically earned the trust and the confidence in the customer. So that was something that was interesting. Okay, so we have about 20 minutes left. So my question to you panelists is, we have a couple more pre-written questions, or we could open it up to the Q&A. What do you think?
Just open it up.
Yeah.
All right.
But either way.
Some Q&A. I believe Susanna has been teeing up some questions for us. All right. The most upvoted question was, how do your lead questions change from an inbound versus how do your lead questions change from an inbound versus outbound prospects?
So this is, again, someone that's inbound, you've got interest, versus outbound where you are specifically trying to elicit their interest. Yeah. Eliciting interest is always interesting versus like someone that's already interested. If someone's already interested, you can call up and ask them a lot of questions about, okay, why the interest, what's going on, ask them about the situation, ask them about maybe some of the, maybe some of the pain. When it's outbound, it's harder. In fact, the last thing you want to do is like a spray and pray in a lot of approaches. And I've seen people do it. Oh, the best thing I can do is send out a million emails and a million questions. And yes, taking different tacks and approaches is important. When you're doing it from an outbound perspective, you're better off doing a lot more research to understand what question or what approach is going to elicit a response or an engagement. That's what I've found. So doing some good work on, hey, are there major incidents for this company? Are there news stories that outline the pain or area of interest in something I was doing or I'm trying to sell? That would then trigger a, hey, they had this outage, let's say retail, boom, Black Friday, major outage at Estee Lauder, right? Probably a company that's interested in understanding how that never happens again, right? Might want to send to the CIO or CTO, hey, what if we could have, addressed this issue before it became that major outage and proactively notified you that incident was about to occur and fixed it before it happened? What would that have meant to you? And just send that out as an email. That's just a simple question or engagement, right? Boom, you're now educated. You can get, I'm guessing they probably want to know. They probably don't want to ever see that happen again. So that's an example of, for when you're thinking like an outbound, how do you kind of get them to engage versus they're already sort of engaged. Why are they engaging? Right. So those are sort of the things that I kind of take a look at those two, but I'm going to stop here.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. Anyone else want to weigh in before we move to the next question?
Yeah, that's a good answer. Inbound, you can be more direct. You reached out to us. What are you looking for? Get more detail. Outbound, you need a little more research done ahead of time.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. I have seen that using facts, industry stats, etc. There we go. And asking a prospect if they agree or experience the same issues is a good start. Does the panel agree?
I'll say yes, but even though I use a lot of facts and data and industry stats, what people really respond to are stories and success stories. If you can share what you've done for someone else in the industry. So I would encourage a combination of facts, data, stories, because stories that's what gets our reptilian brain to pay attention, listen, and we all want to hear a good story.
Great point. I know that I react to stories for sure, as do our customers. All right, let's move on.
I think I'll comment on this, on Paul's question. I understand this though as a way to just start a conversation. If you give someone something to react to, like here's a stat, and asking if they agree, I think is another way to engage their brain. You do need to go. I mean, stories are the most powerful, but I think perhaps as a conversation starter, I can see this being a good tactic.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move on to the question from Angela. How do you engage or motivate potential customers to be part of your beta when your application is still in the MVP stage?
So,
go ahead.
Potential customers, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I guess this is where the early startup kind of comes into play, right? In those cases, you are looking for partners that are willing to invest some of their time in you, probably to have a pretty major impact in you, by the way, to then develop a solution that's going to solve a specific problem, right? So in those cases, that's one of the things that you want to kind of outline to the customers, is that we are developing a very critical solution that's going to solve your problem. It's not perfect yet. It's probably a situation where almost no one's perfect yet. We would be very happy and make sure that you are a premier customer and have tremendous input on the solution. So if you engage, you'll have that. That's where a lot of, especially larger organizations, will commit even to a small organization, because in a lot of ways, and I don't want it to sound bad, but it gives them comfort that they can own the direction of this solution, can drive it in the areas and direction that they need you to go. And we've seen this, I've seen this in the past with a lot of the smaller startups or earlier startups I've been involved in. It's okay. It's okay to have that, as long as it's not going to drive you in a direction that's going to be against the rest of the industry. But you want to set some expectations or talk to them and talk about that partnership. Yes, we can be a partner with you. We can take your needs and make you a highlight so that we can solve the specific needs that you have as opposed to everyone else. And they will be more likely to engage with you in your early stage if they believe they have that partnership with you and can have, frankly, some control of product direction. That might be one of the things that a big company is looking for, especially.
But not everyone's an early adopter. So you need to make sure that you're talking to people that are willing to be on the, what do they call it, the bleeding edge. Not everyone will do that.
Yeah, and what I would add to that is, I mean, obviously everything aligns around the value that the prospect is expecting to derive from the solution. And oftentimes it's something very specific that they're looking for, that they would have to pay professional services or go outside of the box to have it fit what they're trying to achieve. So I think that's the area. It can be a decent value proposition for them if you're able to deliver something that's very customized to what they're trying to do, their specific use case.
And to Lori's point about not everyone being an early adopter, it definitely seems like these sorts of folks self-identify. There are people who just want that shiny new toy, and they're ready to take, some bumps and some bugs in order to be able to experience that and give that early feedback.
Yeah. And large organizations often have specific titles and roles that are focused on this. Usually like an innovation officer or innovation, I always forget what the specifics are, but look for something along those lines, because those are the ones that are looking for innovative new solutions that they're going to invest time and focus in to bring in their organization that may not be perfect yet, or that may be valuable, but the rest of the world doesn't know about, but they want to be the first because it's going to provide them with a competitive advantage. So those are some targets that you might want to look for. Wish I had time to go back in my email and pick out the specific titles, because there's about a half dozen really good ones that would be interested in having these types of conversations, even at the largest financial services or retail or manufacturing companies.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Question from Victor. How do you identify business pains and tie it to gains in your offering? when dealing with a difficult stakeholder who is answering probably most of your questions?
I don't quite understand that question.
Yeah, I'm struggling with that as well. Identify business pains, dealing with maybe.
One thing I would say is that it's good to realize, as Victor brings up the idea of stakeholders, that there are multiple stakeholders, especially if you have a complex solution, meaning that it's not something you just buy over the phone, one call, done, but there's more complexity to it, that there could be many different stakeholders, could be 6 or 7 or 8 in a company, and knowing what each one wants and needs is important to know. But I'm not sure exactly how to answer that question.
Yeah, riffing on the stakeholders part, maybe one of you remembers the serious decisions, I think, graphic on the number of people it now takes to make a decision on a purchase, and it used to be there are 3 tiers, and it used to be 1 and 2, and now it's 2 or like 1 is the first tier was maybe 1 to 3 people, and then the middle tier was 4 to 6 or what have you, and then the next tier was 6 and above, something like that. And those numbers have increased as folks have more responsibilities, and so more people have to be part of a decision. But I don't remember the specifics of it, so sorry about that.
Right, and the biggest issue can be, one of the best things you can do is help a company know how to work together to figure out what it is that they want, because sometimes there's so much internally debate about how to solve a problem that they'll just put it off and they won't work with you or anybody else because it's just too difficult to navigate all the issues. And if you can learn how to help them make a decision, you can be doing a great service to them and also to moving your process forward.
Yeah. I'll just quickly state that, like, the key to most of this is making sure you have, frankly, at minimum, a coach that can help you and open up and provide you more information about the stakeholders and how you're going to relate your solution to the business pains. But ideally, you want a champion. And the difference between a coach and a champion is, at the end of the day, when you're not there, the champion is going to continue being there selling for you and helping address and connecting those dots when you're not there. A coach won't. A coach will help you and will give you some information, but that's it. So having a good champion in these types of cases that can have organizational knowledge and be there selling for you when you're not there, that's going to be the key. That's what's going to help you tie this together to get the information. And then after you're not there, when they're actually making the decisions, because you're not there when they're making decisions, I will guarantee you that. You need the champion there to help them guide and shepherd this through so that they make the decision for you versus someone else. Those are my thoughts.
Awesome.
I would say also, champions are not found, they're developed.
Good point.
So it's not just, oh, let me go find my champion. You need to work to help develop a champion also and enable them.
And those are internal people at the prospect company that you want to work at, for those that might not know that.
Okay, we've got about 5 minutes left, so I think instead of taking any more questions, I'd love to see if any of the 3 of you have any final remarks or anything that's been on your mind as you've been answering these questions, or final advice to give to these startup employees who have 3 years or less of experience, AEs and BDRs, or if you just want to wish them good luck and we can be on our way.
I was just going to say, the way I attempted to add value today was to try to remember what it was like for me when I was new in different roles that I had, and having some empathy, and the fact that instead of trying to dazzle someone with something that I might know that I could talk about and sound really smart, I want to offer, a nugget or two, something that you could take and put in. all did it or not. That's an example of what giving value and having empathy for the people at the other end who we can't see, but we know you're out there. And if you can do that, if you can develop that and then bounce it off people, like, is this a good answer to your question, or did I answer your question? That can be really helpful for you. And I do wish everybody great luck. Sales is an admirable profession. It's one of the best professions in the world. And whether you're a founder, whether you're a founder or your role is in sales. I mean, you are in sales if you're a founder, but it's important skills to know and master, and they help you in your whole life.
So I was going to say also, Lori, that sales is such a great career, and it's such a great skill set to have regardless of what you choose to do later with it. So, and it does take work. Like, your sales skills aren't going to develop on their own. I applaud everybody that is attending the session because it shows a willingness and an interest in getting better. And the only way that you're going to get better is by practice and learning and mentors. So I would really encourage y'all to just continue to develop the skill, and it's a fantastic profession.
Yeah, I'd say certainly the most successful salespeople that I've ever seen, they have that grit. They don't stop. They keep driving. They're not afraid to put in the time and the effort. They're open-minded, and in this day and age, it's funny. I remember 20 years ago, it seemed like we were all just kind of trying to figure this out. These days, there are specific processes and great organizations that you can join, especially in software, that have amazing sales processes for you to learn from. I would encourage you to be open-minded, learn from them, learn the best from each of the different processes, and grow yourself, because those will be the lessons that you take from, organization to organization to make sure that you're successful across organizations. Start with the basics, and then the rest of it is probably up to you and your personality. The best salespeople are always the most unique flowers I've ever met in my entire life. And we're all unique people. We're all unique flowers. But salespeople have their unique approach. Some people are great relationship sellers. Some people have an ability to have ADD and take a look at 15 things at one time and understand the organization. Some people just develop an ability to spot pain, develop a champion, and drive a deal just tomorrow. Find out the things that you're good at and accentuate that, but start with the basics of some really great sales processes about how you open, how do you find pain, how do you develop a champion, how do you test them to help get the deal closed. Think about those, believe in those, really test those. But also believe in yourself and the things that you're individually good at, because those are the things that will drive you to tremendous success. Don't squash your individuality as you're taking a look at those sales processes. Use the sales processes as a basis, and then your individual strengths as the accelerator, is what I would say.
Well, thanks for the